I would like to invite you to the podium to share with us some of your perspectives on the recent elections, but moreover, their importance not only for Zambia, but for the African continent. Mr. President, please, the podium is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're excited to be here. Very excited to be here. We're grateful for the opportunity that has been given to us to engage with the U.S. Institute of Peace, of course, senior government officials and other dignitaries that are here. On behalf of the people of Zambia, we're grateful, very grateful for your warm reception and inviting us to this platform, this very important institute in fostering peace, I believe, not just in your country, but internationally. Peace, security, and stability are of great importance to us in our country, in our region, and indeed in the world. Our main agenda, having won an election under very difficult conditions, circumstances, is clearly to develop our economy for the benefit of our people. It will not be possible, this will not be possible without peace and stability, without security. We are under no illusion at all that we will never achieve our objectives of economic growth if our country, our region, our world remains unstable, because it will take away the resources, instability will take away the resources, will take away time that is required to reorganize our economy to benefit our people. And it's therefore important for us to address one or two things, a couple of things today, one of which is really to indicate the power of democracy, the power of the people to choose leadership that they believe will answer their challenges or the challenges they face. In our case, the young people, population, large proportion of the population are young people, women, deliver this change in a democratic way. And this is about the third time since 1991, putting 1991 together, 1991, 2011, 2021 is the third time that Zambians are delivering a peaceful change of leadership from one political party to another. I think this is important on our continent, with the negative things happening in other parts of the continent. So I think something we can pick from there, not just for Africa, but for other regions. As a new government, we are committed to human rights. We're committed to restoring the rule of law. We are committed to fostering democracy and what it offers for our people beyond our national boundaries. Transparency is very important in the way we will run the country going forward. Free media, very important. Fourth estate. We've already sent a message, clear message to the media that they will self-regulate. They are very excited about this as a media, because they've been gagged for too long, they've been attacked for too long in their cause of duty, unnecessarily. This will be a thing of the past. As I said, civil liberties, freedoms are very important to us, fundamental to a democracy. We're committed to good governance. As I said, good governance goes with restoring the rule of law. Just order in a country. Before we took over, before we assumed leadership for service, the country was in a very difficult space. A woman, widowed woman, could not trade in a market, could not feed her children by trading in the market, because party zealots, cadres, hounded them out of markets. Just by a word of mouth, we've restored normalcy in public places in our country. That's what democracy can do. With little effort, little money, but leadership is crucial. I think as part of lessons to learn, leadership is very crucial on our continent, in our individual countries. The COVID-19 situation has not helped our situation, or indeed yours and other countries. And I think it's important that we as a global community invoke and work together to mitigate the negative effects of the pandemic. We have inherited a very, very challenged economy, a huge debt mountain. We have to dismantle this because it's taking away resources for development. Two elements in our budget stand out. Two, only two, generally. One is debt service. Two is public sector pay. And they take away resources meant for investment expenditure, revenue generation, and therefore opportunity for our people in terms of jobs, in terms of business opportunities, in terms of health education. So we intend to deal with this issue vigorously, and obviously we invite the support of countries like yours and other countries that are part of the civilized world. Very important. Revolving around issues revolving around this matter is of paramount importance to us because we know if we do not bring COVID under control, we have no chance in hell to revive the economy. And also, the first world would not have done or achieved much by vaccinating your people, and our people are not being vaccinated because we will become a perfect host or hosts for mutations. The pandemic will mutate in our countries. So you will not be successful here unless we are successful everywhere. We are committed as a new government to fiscal discipline, macro stability, growing our economies of paramount importance. That's what will support the social side. I like talking by way of equations, mathematical. One side is the economy, one side is social support. There's no way we can make social support viable, this part of the equation, if the economy is deliric, if debt is choking us. So we intend to use the mandate given to us by the people of Zambia to get this equation balanced properly and working for our people. International support in this area is of absolute necessity. But we will do things that are within our control, like controlling our own extravagant expenditure habits, reining in on this so we can release resources for development. But with that, it means we will demonstrate commitment, we'll walk the talk, and requesting for international support should make it easier for you to look at our case. I think our case is special. Our government has been dubbed the New Dawn government. Some call it Freedom Day. Freedom has come. Literally that. There's a lot of messaging around just citizens feeling free at last. Freedom brings entrepreneurship to the table, brings opportunity to the table. Environment is very important to us. We cannot accelerate economic development because we need it at the expense of opportunities for future generations. We've set up the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment. We've set up the Ministry of Small, Medium-Scale Enterprises to combine the needs of creating opportunities for our people, but at the same time, making sure that we do this in a responsible way, in an environmentally sustainable way. Because of where I am, this platform you've given me, I just want to confirm that we're committed to making our contribution, active contribution in fostering peace, stability, security on our continent. This is top priority. again, a mathematical relationship or expression. This equation of economic development on one side cannot happen without peace and stability, security on the other. The two are hand in glove, and we intend to play our part actively. Zambia is committed to taking steps that will assure stability on our continent, on the global platform. Zambia's efforts, combined with the regional efforts, regional economic groups, SADC, where we belong, African Union, the United Nations, countries like yours that know the dangers of insecurity. You know it well, we all know it very well. We know the damage it can cause and the social friction and suspicions that can arise if this is not managed properly. So we'll play our part. We want to cooperate more with yourselves. This institute, this government, this institute, other governments, other relevant institutes would like to work with you in a meaningful way, not tomorrow, but like yesterday. Because the threat of what's happening in Mozambique is worrying us, I must confess. From Lusaka to the Mozambique border is only 30 minutes away by helicopter. And we can't wait, we shouldn't wait until the situation degenerates and walks through our borders. Let's work together in this area. So relationships with this institute, very important to us. The US government, indeed, other members of the global community. President, thank you for the opportunity to share our views on this platform. God bless.
Mr. President. May I invite you to
Thank you.
join us here? Thank you very much. And may I invite our panel, please be seated. May I invite Director Banks and Ambassador Carson to join us as well. Mr. President, we're delighted that you have agreed to join us in this format because it gives certainly all of us, but particularly you, an opportunity to perhaps delve a little more deeply into some of the themes that you outlined in your excellent remarks here.
Indeed.
And I would like this to be a real conversation, but let me see if I can get us going. I will tell you that the Zambian elections, your victory in those elections, was something that was enthusiastically cheered in its own right, but also because, as our President Lise Grande outlined in her remarks, we have been sadly witnessing over the last several years serious backsliding when it comes to democracy on the African continent, and let's be clear, beyond. And so the Zambian elections gave us great hope. But we also know that this was a long-fought and hard-won victory.
Indeed.
And we are keen to learn the lessons of your experience in making it possible for this third transfer, peaceful transfer of power through the ballot box in Zambia. You alluded earlier to the importance of leadership. There's no question here, and I think we need to emphasize that. But there must be other lessons that I hope you will agree to share with us, not the least of which is the question of organization. Elections and electoral victories don't just happen. They require work, they require structure, they require conceptualization, and they require organization. Would you take this opportunity to help us understand better
Thank you very much.
what went well in...
Yes. I think the lessons for us are very clear. And they can easily be isolated in categories, I think, that are logical. The first is a realization by players, participants in a particular country like ours, that democracy is the way to go. that we believe in the values around in a democratic dispensation. Because if we didn't believe in that, we would be looking for other ways of seeking public office. We wouldn't, because we don't believe in those other ways. Autocratic related ways, violent ways, no. So we're stuck with a democratic route. I think that's important. Yeah. It's an important lesson. Because if you weave away from there as a group, as a political party, you are likely to falter, number one. Number two, to understand that the environment is difficult. So to be strong, to be focused, it's important. We went through quite a lot, and most of you are not aware that we were detained 15 times. And for many, if they would probably not survive 15 detentions. Yeah. So resilience, because you focused. Number three, strategy. Strategy. Yeah. Strategy in terms of what we want to achieve, how to do it. Tactics. We should have been in office much earlier. We believe we won a couple of elections, 2015, 2016, a by-election. But we did not assume public office because we did not button up certain things. We think the election results were marginally in our favor, we believe. This is not for today's debate. That's our belief. But because the results were not decisive, we allowed the people who count the votes and the regime in place to manipulate the results. So we set out in 2021, towards 2021, to win number one by a large margin, a landslide. I think we achieved that.
Indeed.
And it was difficult to manipulate, to play around with that. So the lesson for others is to focus, get your strategies right, win by big margin. So no arguments. Yeah. But to do that, you have to mobilize. You have to mobilize, you have to lead, especially the portion of the population which is largest, the youth. I think we did that.
Indeed.
What others heard from outside, the youth nicknamed me Bali. It was really an attachment, and that the youth made that this is the team that can cross us over. So we did that. Number two, we understood that if we just won, although we would win by a large margin, without protecting the vote, it would be an exercise in futility. So we put in place a program for vote protection. We did that. I think these are the two key things. But to achieve all of that, organization, leadership, getting to know your voters, getting to know what they want. Because for us, we drove our campaign on a platform of change. Change to do what? Economy. Economy, what does that mean? Food. Jobs. Yep. Business opportunities. Better health. All of that. So the messaging then becomes a nation. I think that's mundane. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. That you make it sound so simple, but as we listen to you, yeah, we begin to appreciate just how much work and thought goes into the building of a successful mobilization that in turn leads to a successful election. Director Banks, the Biden administration has made it very clear that democracy is going to be the central pillar of its foreign policy, and that was certainly reiterated strongly when the President addressed the General Assembly just 2 days ago. And I wonder if you could share with us the ways in which, and I'm sure this came up in the course of the President's meeting yesterday with Vice President Harris as well, share with us how the administration conceives of the U.S. role in being a partner for democracy in Africa and elsewhere around the world.
Thank you, Ambassador Moose, and thank you to the USIP for holding and hosting this important conversation and for welcoming President Hichilema here. I had the honor of being present at your inauguration, and which was less than 30 days ago now. And to go from there to see you here, it's truly, I think, remarkable and a strong signal to the continent, and really exemplifies, Zambia does, and your victory and what you have done so far even exemplifies what the Biden-Harris administration wants to do in terms of promoting democracy. And as we've heard this week in President Biden's speech at the UN General Assembly, as is stated in our interim national strategic guidance, democracy and democratic ideals are the foundation of our policy, both at home and abroad, but particularly in our U.S.-Africa policy, because we firmly believe that with the trends of authoritarianism that we see around the globe, and certainly also in Africa, that we need to counter that with strong countries and democracies who have shown, not just stated, but exemplified and exhibited a commitment to democratic ideals, because it is democratic ideals, it is strong democracies with accountable institutions that their populations hold them to account with, commitment to the rule of law. All of these things can deliver peace and prosperity for their people. So that is the basis and that is the foundation of our U.S. Africa policy for this administration, and we are really pleased beyond that Zambia exemplifies that and is here to be able to spread that message and to serve as a model for other countries on the continent.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that'll be a very reassuring message to many across the continent. But Ambassador Carson-Johnny, if I might, we have both been laboring in this vineyard for many, many, many years together, and we know well the practical challenges and difficulties for partners, friends of Africa to promote democratic development institutions. You, not only in your role here at USIP, but also on the board of directors of the National Democratic Institute. And I wonder, we have both, I think, as we watched the recent developments, questioned ourselves about what it is we need to do differently or do better in a practical way, not just in terms of our rhetorical commitment, but as a practical matter. And I wondered if you would share with us and with the President your thoughts about what lessons we should take from the Zambian experience.
Ambassador Moose, George, thank you very much for the question. I'd like to also express my pleasure at being with President Hichilema and congratulate him again for his outstanding victory in Zambia. I think it does constitute a victory for the people of Zambia and a victory for democracy on the continent. If I could, I'd like to say just a few words about democracy and some lessons. Your victory is an encouraging signal that the demand for democracy in Africa remains very, very strong, and that there is an overwhelming desire among people to be able to select their leaders, to be able to know that their government is one that they have chosen and one that is going to be responsive to their desires. The polling data out there strongly tells us, based on what we see, that an overwhelming majority of Africans support multi-party democracy. They support term limits for presidents. They're opposed to military coups d'etats, and they want governments that are responsive to their people. But as Ambassador Moose pointed out, and as your own experiences probably tell you, achieving democracy is an enormous challenge. We also see, based on what's been happening around the continent these days, that democracy is still enormously fragile in Africa, and that sustaining democratic progress is at risk in many places. And it's at risk in many places, I think, fundamentally for several different reasons, which you and other leaders will have to grapple with, and some of which you've already spoken. Enormous democratic backsliding, people trying to change constitutions to keep themselves in power. It's also a reflection of a rising authoritarianism in Africa, where a dozen leaders have enhanced their power through various means. And now we have a couple of other things that are out there that are of concern. And one clearly is the rise of violent extremism. And you see it very closely in your own neighborhood for the first time in northern Mozambique. And that is a challenge. And then finally, most disturbing is the return of the military coup d'etat, something that we thought we had permanently pushed aside. And these are issues which are there. You've managed to keep your military in the barracks and neutral. That has not been the case in Chad, Mali, most recently Guinea, and attacks in Sudan just last week. All of those are challenges out there. There are lessons to be learned, but your victory is an indication that the demand signal for democracy and elected leadership, democratic governance, multipartyism is alive and well, and that people want it.
Thanks, Johnny. Mr. President, let me turn it back to you, because as I said, I think many of us, friends of Africa, are questioning whether we have it right in terms of how we go about supporting Democrats and promoting democracy. And I wondered if you would talk to us about the role of your external partners, not just in the general, but in what ways have we made your life easier? And in what ways might we have complicated your life, perhaps unintentionally? I'm very mindful, for example, Mr. President, of the power of incumbency, how difficult it is for an opposition party to challenge a party in power. And oftentimes that power of that party in power is associated with relationships to external partners in Africa.
Indeed.
And would you talk to us a little bit about what can we do to help sort of mitigate that imbalance, to level the playing field for movements, democratic movements that are seeking to challenge existing authority?
I think it's a very important issue you've raised. But before I delve into that, just to express my agreement to my colleagues on the left. Deep knowledge that they bring to this discussion and which we share. There is no democracy, a genuine democracy, that is shielded from what's going on elsewhere. It doesn't exist. So a democracy within national boundaries or democracies in a regional organization like our Southern African Development Community is in the context of what's happening elsewhere. I think it is important we see things from the right angle. Otherwise, we'll miss the point. Our democracies in Africa are affected by what's happening in the global community. Who pulls in which direction? For what reasons? What's the interest of global players in Africa, on the continent? What do they want? Resources, influence, sometimes partnerships. So I think I want to dwell on partnerships other than other issues that interests countries outside of Africa to take interest in what's going on in Africa. So I think partnerships are very, very important. So you get your partners, you choose your partners because you have certain things in common. So earlier you asked me a question, I said, how did you do it? I said, first, believing that democracy is the way. So equally, it's important to agree that in working with others that have an influence in your own country, whether you like it or not, is to try and isolate or identify those that you may share common values. Very important. Common values, that democracy is the one that should deliver for the people. Every time, people must be put at the center, our young people. So we think that in as much as we share values with yourselves, constitutionalism, rule of law, human rights, working against vices such as corruption, which really damages our countries, beyond what some of you may even be conscious of. If you look at the debt issue I talked about in our country,
Yes.
a huge debt portfolio, what are the factors that led to such a huge debt mountain
Yes.
when 10 years ago our debt position was around $2 billion after HIPIC qualification? HIPIC, it was called HIPIC completion.
Yeah.
We achieved that at a great cost. Wages did not go up for a while, public wages, and the case was made that everyone must contribute towards taking our debt out. 10 years down the road, we have a huge debt. What motivated this? Partially corruption. Where? Infrastructure. The appetite in the guise of infrastructure, money was borrowed, balance sheet was distorted, money was borrowed, but not all of it worked to help the country. Corruption. So if we talk against corruption, we search around. Who else will support us in the fight against corruption? I hope I'm making sense.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I hope I'm making sense.
Absolutely.
Who else? So who also does not believe in corruption? Because we have to relate with other people. We're not an island. We're a global village. So this is where alignment to values will be durable, will be long-lasting. Because you don't have to persuade others to share your views because you already have a shared views based on values. Very important. I will not drive it beyond there. I think you understand what I'm saying. Again, we need to know that we cannot run a country's elections purely on our own. We need minimum standards. What would we say are minimum standards for a democratic election to be called an election which is free and fair? So electoral bodies that manage our elections, how do they do it? How independent are they? How will they ensure that the results reflect the will and wishes of the people? We have seen it before. So we're working on those issues, but we can only do that together with others that believe in what we believe in. And then we can offer opportunities for our people. I want to believe that if we leave, say, countries on the African continent on their own purely, without supporting them, we risk seeing a backslide in democracy. Because the issue of colleagues wanting to extend their stay in office beyond what people have said, citizens have said, 10 years is enough. Whatever years you agree, some are here, they're extending the term to 6, 7 years. I mean, if you have 6 years, 7 years in office, 7 plus 7 is 14, plus 7 is 21 years.
Yeah.
No, please. No. Because the other matter is that leadership at that level, at the presidency, must not be really pushed because it benefits the occupant financially. When we drive it that way, people want to stay there forever. So I think we need to create alternatives for leaders in Africa.
Indeed.
Clear alternatives that when they leave office, they will still lead a decent life. And that brings me to the issue of, despite the past, for us, how we were treated, we are determined that the colleagues that have exit don't have to fear that they'll be put through what they put us through. That's very important, so that they know that they'll be safe, they know that the rule of law applies to them as well, that they'll be protected, but yet the fight against corruption will continue, because it will be run professionally by oversight institutions, and we will not use a political hand for vengeance, for vindictiveness, for retribution, but more to recover assets that belong to the people of Zambia, because they are the owners. Yeah. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Indeed. But without abusing human rights, without threatening people to be put where they shouldn't be. Yeah. So I think a safety valve, I've been observing this issue. Yes. A safety valve is very important for colleagues to know that they can exit office and still have a normal, decent life. And I think sometimes, I know countries like yours have provided platforms to ease in leaders that leave office. I think we must create those opportunities.
No, that's an excellent point, Mr. President. And you're absolutely right. This is something that, to which we've given thought in the past. And your notion of providing an exit, an honorable exit for those who are leaving power. Otherwise, they have no incentive to leave.
they develop other ideas.
They develop other... Changing
constitutions. What we want to assure you, and I will be abusive a little bit, the platform you've given me, I send a message to the people of Zambia. That we should not entertain to create special favors for those occupying public office so they can stay in office longer. We've had constitutional review commissions in our country that have clearly stated, as my elder has said, the desire of the people on our continent is with term limits so that we can turn over leaders and leaders can focus on serving the people and providing leadership to improve the lives of the people during the period that they're allowed to serve the people. And I think this appetite, desire to say this one is special and they must stay in office forever breeds autocratic behavior. It just filters through without even noticing it. And we shouldn't do that. And I think the global democratic community should support African countries not to encourage our people, a small number, to do things like that. They end up ugly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, if I just might tease out something that I think was implicit in what you said about the issue of corruption. As we always say, it takes two to tango.
Indeed.
I think when it comes to the issues of principle, there is perfect alignment, for example, with the U.S. government and other partners who share this concern about corruption. But I do think that we, all of us, need to examine exactly how our practices align with our principles when it comes to this issue.
Agreed.
And we have not been very good, frankly, in understanding and dealing with, if you will, the root causes of corruption and how it becomes embedded in and endemic to especially developing countries, which are in a weakened position to deal with powerful external actors. So
indeed.
I think there was a bit of that implicit in what you said, and I wanted to tease it out.
True.
Director Banks, returning again to the Biden administration's very forthright pronouncements in terms of its hopes and aspirations for Africa. And we know that, as the President said earlier, and democracy cannot flourish in the context of economic deprivation and threats to security.
That's right.
And I know already the administration has begun to articulate if you will, a strategy. And could you share a little bit about how the administration sees these elements and how we hope to bring them together into a strategy that would address precisely the kinds of concerns that the President raised earlier?
Sure, absolutely. So I think the first sort of visible element of the strategy that we will see shortly is the Summit for Democracy that, President Biden committed to holding during the campaign, and we are looking at scheduling before the end of the year, where we will invite selected countries to talk about the ideals, the tenets, the foundations of democracy, and to help serve as an example and a model for other countries so they can share and export their democratic experiences. And look, no democracy is perfect. As you mentioned, democracies are fragile and require work. And so this will be the beginning of a process that will extend throughout the following year with a follow-up summit later at the end of the following year. But I think in general, you've already seen as well the president talk about his commitment to combating corruption. He issued a national security memorandum talking about combating corruption, again, which erodes democracy. And as you mentioned, President Hichilema. So again, when we know that when populations, when people have an eroded confidence in their governments to deliver for them, then that also impacts economic prosperity in a country. It draws away investors who would be looking at investing in a country and providing more jobs and opportunities for the people of the country. So we know combating corruption is, I think, another key element of our strategy in order to make countries more prosperous, to help them recover even from the economic effects of COVID-19, as well as the health, the very real health impacts, and not just COVID-19, but also the following pandemic. And as we saw the president host his summit on COVID-19 yesterday and the commitments that were made in terms of providing additional doses around the world to lower middle income and middle income countries. So I think these things in tandem lead to what we're trying to do on the continent in terms of increasing economic growth and prosperity through the Build Back Together campaign of the Prosper Africa Initiative, which brings together 17 U.S. government departments and agencies to increase two-way trade, mutually beneficial trade for the people of Africa and for Americans. And with a specific focus on encouraging investors, women investors, and small and medium enterprises. So I was very encouraged to hear, President, about your creation of a ministry focused on small and medium enterprises. So again, Zambia really is leading the way as an exemplar of the U.S.-Africa policy that this administration is trying to promote. So I think if you look at all of these elements, how democracy delivers for its people, how combating corruption increases confidence in the people and in investors, and that can bring greater security. So that's the final element of the policy. And you talked about, I know you're concerned with what's going on in northern Mozambique and security. And really, if you look at the root causes, it is about lack of opportunity. It's lack of, jobs and education. So, and even though it will take some time to address, we have to start looking at the root causes, which we are, while we're focusing as well on youth and making sure that they're fully engaged and have employment opportunities that will deter them from taking some of these more extreme elements. While also working with our colleagues in the security sector and Department of Defense to look at the very real security challenges in the region, which is necessary to address at the same time. But we look to our regional partners, we look to host governments, we will partner with them to lead the way on this, addressing the security challenges, but also addressing the root causes.
Great, that's
Thank
important.
you very much. In the interest of being also, again, very candid, Mr. President, I will say that we, too, have learned some very important lessons over the last 20 years. We just marked the 20th anniversary of 9/11. We know all of the structures and strategies that were put in place in the wake of 9/11 to try to deal with both the threat to us directly, but the growing threat of violent extremism to everybody in the rest of the world. And yet here we are, we're 20 years on, that threat is still very much with us. And I wanted to turn to Ambassador Carson, who knows Mozambique as well as any of us, and of course who also served as our ambassador next door in Zimbabwe, and perhaps reflect a little bit on particularly the thinking that's going on in this house at USIP as we're thinking about this ongoing threat and challenge of dealing with violent extremism, how it relates to those other agendas.
No, thank you, George. And I think that we have to take the issue of violent extremism very, very seriously. But as we look at trying to combat violent extremism, we shouldn't focus all of our energy and activities on looking at military solutions. Because military solutions may, in fact, drive an immediate cessation of activity or a decrease in activity, but they don't, in effect, address the root causes of the violence that has emerged. And looking at issues of violent extremism, whether it is in northern Mozambique, whether it is in the northeastern corner of Nigeria and the Lake Chad Basin, or whether we're looking at the situation in Mali and the Sahel. It is important to determine, and we try to do a lot of that here in this building, to determine what are the drivers of these various conflicts. Why is it that we have seen people turn away from civil responses to militant responses? And how do you dig down into those and find out what they are? And I think in doing so, it's important to look at those root causes, but it's also looking at how you build understanding and resilience in communities, working with women, working with youth, working with traditional leaders, working with local government leaders in the process to help address those root causes, help to build resilience, and help to reduce the fragility that is a part of the situation. In the case of Mozambique, even before the jihadist and religious element came into play, it was, in fact, an area of the country whose importance and wealth was increasing while the impoverishment and the marginalization of the communities was decreasing. And what you have is a period of enormous neglect in a region of great wealth, which has now been exploited by individuals coming in and taking advantage of the anger and resentment and marginalization that has already been there for long periods.
Yeah.
Mr. President, I was going to I'm being reminded that you have another life and other obligations to meet, and we certainly don't want to prevent you from doing so. But I just wanted to say, and I want to give you an opportunity
just to tag on what
let me just say that what Johnny just described, from my perspective, was one of the most impressive aspects of your mobilization.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed.
I mean, what you succeeded in doing was building those relationships with community groups, with youth, with women.
Absolutely. So
that indeed there was a reasonable hope on their part that this being a part of this movement was going to help them achieve their aspirations. So, in a way, Johnny, I think what we'd like to understand more is how you conceived that, how you did it. Anyway, I would like to give you an opportunity to.
Yeah, I think just a tag. Exactly. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
No.
Just a little tag on the root causes of some of these negative things that are dreadful from any angle. I like what I'm hearing here. What we went through as an opposition party in our country was a systematic marginalization by the party in office. And name-calling, abuse, characterization that we actually were viewed as not worthy citizens of our country. And we had to come around that characterization to make sure that citizens didn't believe the things that were said. So it is possible for a regime to create an imagery position of a genuine democratic opposition party, which leads to marginalization, which leads to exclusion. That's dangerous. So I just wanted to share that part, that one of the things we did then from the opposition is to go out to communities, even those that were made to believe that the country must be run on ethnic grounds.
Yeah.
And on that basis, economic exclusion, job opportunities, business opportunities, literally no contracts to do business. Even when people owned a small asset like a house, tenants got scared to rent such a property because of that characterization. So we had to undo all of those issues by going to community to say, we're here to reunite this country. This country has been divided on many, angles. So reuniting the country is one of our key flagships. Of course, the economy rebuilding, we discussed that, but reuniting the country. Deliberately, we went out to do that because we were marginalized ourselves. Our businesses were attacked right, left, center. And people lost jobs in the civil service because they were suspected of being members of our party. So it was such like an impossible mission, but we came around that by going to communities, using community leaders, using church leaders, using the people who influence communities to say, this route is dangerous. This route will cause something we don't want. So we worked on the message of reuniting the country, the message of inclusion and not exclusion, the message of opportunity for all. So I think if you parallel Mozambique issues, there could be elements that could have been allowed to degenerate either by geographical region
By distance.
or by whatever separating factors. So we're working on for us, even now, on the fact that we are one Zambia, one nation. And that's what our founding father, Kenneth David Kaunda, the first president, taught us. So we're reincarnating those issues of unity, inclusion, access to opportunity for all. And I think partially that won us the election, and we will live by that, so that no Zambian feels that because there's a new UPND government, then they will be marginalized. That we will work against. So I just thought I should draw that parallel with Mozambique, because we are neighbors with Mozambique.
Yes.
We were feeling the issues of that nature. And those are, I think, good breeding grounds for negativity.
Yeah.
And I think Africa, as a continent, we should learn from those issues. Whoever is a leader at a particular time must bring all citizens to the table and allow citizens to compete, to access opportunities. We are determined to do that. Thank you.
Mr. President, I want to thank you very much. I think, from my perspective, what you just said may be the most important lesson that we should all draw from your experience, your leadership, and the progress that Zambia has made, continues to make in the area of democracy. I appreciate also we've been remiss in not invoking the memory of President Kaunda in this conversation. He was the first African president I ever met in 1975. So thank you for doing that as well. But most of all, thank you for honoring us with your presence here today. And thank you for sharing with us. As you can tell, we are eager, we're hungry to understand better what we can do better as partners and friends to ensure the continued democratic progress for a continent which is very dear to us. And you have helped us immensely in doing that. We hope there will be other opportunities, you will always be welcome in this House. So thank you all. I want to thank our distinguished panelists, Director Banks, Ambassador Carson, and I, above all, want to thank the audience that has followed us online and hope that you will continue to follow our conversations here at the U.S. Institute of Peace. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.